That is not okay. He seems off.
Yeah. I would say that he does seem off, and his behavior. I will confess. When people focus on these Twitter stories and some of these other examples, I've watched more than 650 of his rallies and his speeches, and I was paying very close attention to his Twitter habits and his social media habits in his first term compared to his second term. To your question, he's off. And here, it's not just in the way that he talks, how he engages with an audience, how he engages with the room. It's also in his habits. He's already posting more than twice the average that he did in his first term. And then you have these outlier examples. And I always think back to what happened in December, where he posted 160 times over the span of 5 hours one night. It wasn't.
You would take away your mom's Facebook account.
Yes,
you would.
and hand her phone after a certain time.
Without a doubt. And so there are these flare-ups. They're just happening more regularly now. You can have some people, and I think there is a part of the news media that acts in some ways just like the diehard MAGA people. They think he's always doing fourth dimensional chess. And there is no strategy here, as we're seeing with Iran. This guy doesn't do strategy. He's tactical. He's gut, visceral reaction. His gut right now is kind of rotten. And he is existing in a landscape like Truth Social, which is way more weird and distorted than even Twitter was back when he was using it aggressively during his first term. So there is something off and different, and it doesn't have to be a question of his mental health, or it could just be his emotions. Right? It doesn't have to be some big plot that he had a stroke or something. He could just be being really emotionally overwhelmed, and social media with all this AI is breaking his brain.
Now he also needs Wellbutrin.
Okay, let's put a pin in that, because I want to know how it shapes your thinking that today the president decided to weigh in on just how difficult cognitive tests really are, and what would happen if any of us were asked to take a cognitive test. Take a listen.
I think everyone in this room is brilliant, but nobody's going to get all 30 questions correct. Nobody. Because when you get to those last questions, they're pretty hard. You got to be pretty sharp. But every time, so I've taken 3. No president, think of this, has ever taken 1. How do you think Biden would have done? I don't think, he might not have gotten that first question right. Anyway, and Obama would have done poorly.
Why has he taken 3?
Well, yeah.
That is a good question.
You don't take them unless you need to.
And it's a great talking point, right, for him. He gets to go ahead and point to this example, but no one's ever taken it before. To your why would be the next question that people have, but he's sitting in a room full of people, and he gets to go out and tell this story. I'm the only one that's taken, and I keep getting a perfect score on this very basic test that's to decide if you have, basic level competency. And I think, then he's going to, and that's part of some of this, and I think we just can't ignore it. This guy has been behaving the same way since the 80s. Some of these things is muscle memory. It's like a twitch, and so this is what he does. It's marketing, and this is one example, and he's going to keep riding that horse as long as he can. That's it, because it reinforces the story that he is mentally well. And I do think there's something to your question in that he is sensitive about the critique that he's off, though. He doesn't like the idea that people think he's aging, losing his game, and I think that's a tie-in with a lot of the images he posts. It's not just that, you can have all kinds of Photoshop stuff. He likes the AI, and there's been some reporting on this a few months ago, because it does make him look vigorous and youthful. Right? It makes him seem a little, it's just like what he looks like, but it's a little softer. It's like always being on a Zoom meeting with that filter. He's living life that way.
He's a morbidly obese 80-year-old man. and so that's you can't AI that. I mean, that's the reality of it. But I want to go back to something you said, because I think it strikes to this idea of a muscle memory. So you're talking about Donald Trump's muscle memory. I want to talk about the muscle memory of our press corps that cover him. And you touched on it just a moment ago in your answer, that there is within that ecosystem a portion of folks who are playing this or writing about this as if there's some strategery going on here. This is not. This is the musings of a man who's losing and has lost a big step from where he was just 6 years ago, folks. So that's number one.
And the Reuters polling, there's Reuters Ipsos polling that says exactly that the American people are saying exactly what you just said. I just want to underscore that.
No, and I'm glad you did, because it's an important part of this, because it really then shows up when you have others who are not telling this story, that are not covering this aspect. Because I can damn well assert to you at this table tonight that if that man sitting in the White House was Joe Biden, and we saw what they did with Joe Biden, when Joe Biden, because of his physical difficulties with his knees or whatever, would stumble or walk slowly, they were damn near ready to put him in an old, a senior citizen facility. Let's put it that way, right? But this is not the case here. When you're looking at this, what do you see? What does it say to you that you've got this bifurcation of storylines about this president?
I think, to the point about the press corps, one thing that if they don't want to cover this stuff, in a serious way, okay, or ask these questions about his health, okay, fine. What I see them doing, though, is something really disturbing. Is that the amount of times that he says, I don't know, to very basic questions has shot through the roof. If you look at his last cabinet meeting, every question he was asked of substance, he immediately kicked it to somebody else to answer that question. He has dramatically increased the number of times that he says, I don't know. So I don't care how vigorous he seems when he calls you and he's working the phones, or you think it, even if you buy into this idea that it's strategy, why doesn't he know answers to very basic questions that the president should know answers to? Why is he saying that a lot more often than he says? Why is when he's asked about things that he did, or tweets that he posted just a few hours ago, he says he doesn't remember, which is part of the things that's happening. And that's the tell. Is that they're also not following some of these bigger storylines. I remember all the reporting when Joe Biden changed his shoes. When he started wearing more comfortable shoes. Wow, can you believe that? He's wearing extra padding in his shoes. For somebody that already had diagnosed neuropathy, and we all knew it because they were at least transparent about it, that this guy says, I don't know, more often than he's ever said, than is reasonably expected of a president, and no one's reporting on that.